Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar being hosted by United Way Waterloo Region Communities, Social Isolation in Waterloo Region. This is the first event for us and a very unique event for us to do it like in this way, but also to have a conversation like this. And we hope that it'll be the first of many conversations to come in the new year. To kick off today's event, I'd like to introduce CEO of United Way Waterloo Region Communities, Joan Fisk, to provide a territorial acknowledgement and to also introduce the topic for today.
Good. I was going to say good morning, everyone, but it doesn't seem to be morning or afternoon these days, does it? But thank you. First of all, thank you for joining this webinar today for, I think, a really important conversation. We have an inclusive region. We often think so, but there's lots of parts of it that we can pay attention to in a much different way. I want to start with an acknowledgement, a territorial acknowledgement. You know, I wonder, often people wonder, why do we do that? Why do we start with a territorial acknowledgement? Well, it's a way of honoring the land that we are here on, that success has been built on that, about the Indigenous people who have been living on this land for generations and generations, who have cared for it for us for thousands of years. It's a long-standing protocol among non-Indigenous Canadians to do this today, but this I want to offer you as an act of reconciliation between the non-Indigenous Canadians and Canadians, because I think that's important to recognize that we need to do that. We acknowledge that the land that which we gather today are the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people and whom we share this land, but their achievements and their contributions are important to be part of an inclusive region. And I know all of you, our panelists particularly, are very sensitive, again, as a recognition of reconciliation. Because together, as our whole topic is today, together we can build a stronger Waterloo region. So I will turn it back to you, Suhanya.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you for that territorial acknowledgement. So today's conversation is really about the experience of isolation here locally in Waterloo Region. And as we start off, I'd like to share some of what has been brought to our attention around what the issue looks like here locally. COVID-19 has exposed how vulnerable some community members are to isolation and unfathomable levels of loneliness. New restrictions to help curb this pandemic have left many without the support of a social bubble, leaving them alone and grappling with not only loneliness, but challenges around basic needs, education, and healthcare. Here in Waterloo Region, 19% of people feel isolated from other community members. And the pillars of quality life, like finances, health, and social contacts, have all been affected by this pandemic. The share of Canadians who rate their life satisfaction as 8 or above fell from 72% in 2018 to 40% in June of this year. And that comes from a StatScan document called COVID-19 in Canada, a 6-month update on social and economic impacts. We know that social isolation affects all demographics and age groups and can lead to diverse negative outcomes, including domestic violence, mental health deterioration, and physical and financial health struggles. So before we get into the conversation with all of our esteemed panelists today, I have the incredible pleasure and honor of introducing each of them to those of you who are on the line. I would like to start with Donna Dubie, the Executive Director of Healing of the Seven Nations. Donna is Haudenosaunee of 6 Nations of the Grand River Territory Turtle Clan. She is the founder and executive director of the Healing of 7 Generations, an organization that has been in the region of Waterloo for almost 20 years and looking forward to celebrating their 20th anniversary this January. The organization offers 22 different programs and services to the community, which are all culturally specific. Donna has a long-standing history of advocating for First Peoples community members in their challenges to struggle through racism and systemic racism that they face on a daily basis. She supports individuals within a multitude of governmental systems, such as the justice system, family and children's services, educational systems, healthcare system, and mainstream organizations that provide services to First Peoples without having the knowledge or know-how to work with First Peoples. Donna, thank you so much for being here with us today. Next, I'd like to introduce Jim Parrott, Executive Director of Spectrum. Jim has worked as a professional librarian at the University of Waterloo from 1970 to 2007. He has been an activist for the local LGBTQ2+ community for nearly 50 years. He was involved with the UW group GLOW for over 20 years, active in the local Pride Committee for the first 5 years of its existence between 1996 and 2000, is the editor of the Grand River Rainbow Historical Project, which was started in 2011, and for the past 8 years has been active in the work of Spectrum, Waterloo Region's Rainbow Community Space. For 20 years, Jim and his gay husband, William Pensart, have enjoyed strolling about in Waterloo Region, holding hands, flaunting their lifestyle, and otherwise providing cheap thrills for those who do not have ready access to their electronic appliances. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Peter Sweeney, CEO of YMCA of Three Rivers. Peter Sweeney is the newly appointed CEO of the YMCA of Three Rivers, Canada's newest following the merger of the YMCAs of Cambridge, Kitchener-Waterloo, Guelph, and Stratford earlier this year. Peter was the CEO of the YMCAs of Cambridge and KW from 2016 until the merger. And previously, Peter worked in the healthcare sector locally at St. Mary's General Hospital and also spent 6 years working in the international development space as the president of an NGO with healthcare projects in Africa, including Haiti. He's a lifelong resident of Waterloo Region and lives in one of our many beautiful downtown cores with his family. Peter, thanks for being with us today. Okay, so we know that COVID-19 has impacted all of our lives, both personal and professional. We're being asked to stay at home, and when we do go outside, we're being asked to limit our contact with others, including our closest family and friends. This pandemic has been limiting our social contact for 9 months already, and we're going into the holiday season, which we know can be an incredibly difficult time for some folks, even without COVID-19. And so it seems natural that people's mental health may be strained at this time. So for my first question, I'm going to start with you, Jim, and then move on to Peter and Donna. And my question is twofold. So the first part is, how did things shift for you personally when we went into lockdown, and how did that affect you? And secondly, how has limiting personal contact impacted the work that you do and the people that you work to serve every day?
First of all, can you hear me? Okay, thanks very much. If there's any interruption in the sound stream, let me know. Maybe the connection's unstable. I'm so happy to be here. This is the first time in 10 months that I felt like I've been stepping out. So this is actually a very big deal for me. As to how it's affected me, at first, it meant that I had more time on my hands because I no longer had the commute between my home and the community center Spectrum because we moved everything to Zoom. And I began with very high hopes about how I might use all this extra time in my personal life, getting organized at home, doing more in my hobbies, learning to play a new musical instrument, this one over here. But things did not unfold in quite that manner. I did indeed attend to a few things that I left on the back burner, but not that much. And at the same time, I began having more and more flashbacks to the days of strolling about outside our building, visiting cafes, and people watching. But the worst of all was the direct lack of contact with friends, the lack of hugs. And in fact, the last time I was in the same physical space with anyone other than my husband was when we went across the street into Waterloo Park a few months ago and said hello to some of our friends in the land back camp. That has been it. And it's been hard stuff. to respond to how it's changed to work with my community, I consider myself fortunate because I have a companion with whom I live, my husband, William, and we're on pretty good terms. So there's that. Unfortunately, many of my older friends in the Rainbow community live alone. And being able to meet as a group via Zoom has really helped many of us retain some sense of community. But everyone says how much they miss the hugs that were a regular part of our get-togethers. And we have lost some people because Zoom didn't work for them. And the transgender groups have also lost participants because some of them live in environments that are unsafe, where they dare not connect to spectrum groups via Zoom. So those are some of the impacts. Thank you so much for asking.
Thank you, Jim. I can definitely appreciate how you feel missing the hugs and kisses. I'm in that boat with you, and the loss of connection to those who you're no longer able to connect with, even with the tools that we have available through Zoom, because it may not be safe for them.
Yeah.
Peter, I'll pass it over to you now to share.
Sure, and I guess I'll just acknowledge that I'm going to lose the award for the best background when I look at Jim and Donna's. I think I'd be better at this by now. You know, for me, I'll try to, you know, touch a little bit on the personal and professional, and like most of us, that line has been, you know, it was, for me anyway, it was fuzzy before, and it's been completely obliterated. You know, the saying, you know, I'm working from home now, it's I'm living at work, has been really acute for a lot of us. In my particular case, you know, you mentioned a pretty significant merger that we have been working on for almost 2 years. Our board of directors approved that merger on March the 11th. And for those of you who remember, on March the 12th was the day the announcement started coming out. And so for me, for those of you who are on the call that know me, you know, I'm a bit of a relational leader, and I had big plans, you know, knowing I was going to be the leader of this new organization that is now spread across, you know, 2 new communities for me, where I don't know all the staff and all the leaders in the community. I put a premium on presence. I put a premium on interpersonal connection and meeting people and knowing their names. It's important to me when I walk into our facilities, and I'm happy when I remember people's names, and you know, they're happy too. And all of a sudden that went out the window. And, you know, here we are 9 months later, and that's not coming back anytime soon. And so for me, on a personal level, in terms of how I lead, I found it really, really hard. And what I've really reflected on is, if here I am as a leader of a large organization, I've grown up in this community, my social network in this community is strong. My social capital in this community is strong. I'm a middle-aged white privileged guy with a good job and a home and a family, and I'm hanging on by a thread. And so when I think about if that's hard for me, and then I look at down and around our staff, and we have about 1,500 people, and you know, the connections we're making, and the degree to which people are struggling, particularly in the workplace, has really been sort of an eye opener for me. And it's, you know, often because of that line that has been completely obliterated. You know, we employ a lot of young moms, and, you know, they're doing their best to show up every single day with little kids at their feet. And it's been really heartbreaking. And in an organization like the Y, that is, you know, I used to tell people, we're in the business of human connection. That is essentially what we do. When you lose that human connection, that interpersonal space, as much as we've done great work to move to virtual, and, you know, we converted a building to a homeless shelter, and we've stepped up in this community, and I'm really proud of the way we've stepped up, that lack of human connection is been really hard. And what I've noticed is the last 2 months has been harder than the first 2. It was a whirlwind for us, anyway, for me. And you're like, in any sort of crisis, you're batting down the hatches, you respond and you beat to it. I'm really seeing the impact on our people. I see it in myself. I look in the mirror every single day, and again, if I'm struggling, I know others are as well. So I'm actually worried about the next couple of months, perhaps more than I was in those first few, because there was outside, there was spring, there was, you know, even the level of uncertainty, it was like, it could probably get better. And then we had a reasonably normal summer. in many respects. And now we're in a worse situation than we were before. And we're heading into a holiday season for those that live alone and are struggling. That's a tough time of year at, the best of times. And then we're going to go into, winter. And, as much as I'm happy about the vaccine announcements, the politicization of that, of the vaccines is worrying for me, and the timing of that. I'm hopeful and optimistic for 2022. I'm worried about 2021.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jim. Thank you for sharing. Donna, what about for you? Oh, you're on mute, Donna. There you go.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I would like to start with myself. I'm a very oriented family person. When we are together with my children and my grandchildren, we hug each other, we kiss each other, and my children and my grandchildren are over 2 different cities and 2 different regions. So we're in a red zone and they're not in a red zone. So, and I got to be very mindful. One of my children, she's very ill with MS right now. And so she's immune compromised. So kind of just breaks my heart that I can't be the mom and the grandmother that I've always been, that we have to be kind of restricted and careful. And, it's like when we were kids, people would go around and say, we almost got to be cootie proof, protect ourselves from the cooties. And so we have to think that way, wearing masks and microbanding all of our things that we touch. And so it's very hard. And then that radiates out into the community, being a community person. And in our community, when we gather for ceremonies or for socials or feasts or anything like that, when we do our 10-day feast for when one of our family members pass away, these are things that we celebrate in large numbers. And it's very hard to do that when you're restricted. And a lot of those things happen on the reserve, and they're in a totally different zone than we are. So how do you do that? I think right now, the thing that's impacted me the most recently is because of the residential school and the 60 scoop and all things like that. Some of our community people are affected far more harder than others, and they have severe mental health issues. And over the last month, starting to get cold weather, we have some of our community members who are down at lot 42. And I've seen some of our community members who are homeless in Cambridge. And being homeless in Cambridge for this specific couple is that much more traumatic for them, because even the places that the city and the region and other social groups would consider a safe place for homeless people, this individual can't go there because she was traumatized by individuals who were using and abusing when she was a child. So even for her to go there to be safe and warm and, have a roof over her head, re-victimizes her over and over. So just trying to help her find a safe place to put her head has been extremely difficult. She's still currently sleeping in the woods in Cambridge. I brought her sleeping bags. Even the gift of a roll of toilet paper is like gold, for somebody who's homeless. So it has opened my eyes for what we consider isolation when individuals who have these issues are that much more isolated than what we could ever imagine. When if you stop to think that you don't even have toilet paper for yourself, that is extremely difficult. So we're trying to work with the systems, but right now the systems just, they don't know. They don't have anything. They don't know how to fix the problem. And that's only one little story of individuals that are in our community that are suffering with these issues. If she was closer, she'd come into the center for the day, have coffee. On Wednesdays, we don't have our community lunches anymore. We would have feasts 2 times a year. She would be able to come to those and be with the community who has now been looked at as her family. None of that's happening. None of that's happening. She doesn't get to feel all those hugs around her, telling her that they care about her and that they will do everything to help her. And so it's extremely sad. And she's not the only one in the community who is in those situations. It's just that much more so touches my heart, because it's our own community that are suffering in this manner, and she shouldn't have to. So I'd like to say thank you for allowing me this moment to share that story. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all of you for sharing so vulnerably about what the experience has been like for you as individuals and as family members and as friends, but also sharing the experiences of trying to serve the people that you have dedicated yourselves to serving. You know, before I go to the next question, I just want to acknowledge how challenging this pandemic is for everybody. And the unique challenges that I imagine each of you feel as a leader. You know, you get put in these positions because you want to see people thrive and you want to see people do well. And there is a level of helplessness that this pandemic has probably brought in terms of your ability to help people do that. And yet you show up every day for your teams and for the people that you're here to serve. And so I want to thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership and for your continued dedication. So my second question actually is a perfect segue from what you had just shared, Donna. And it's the idea that the experience of social isolation can be exacerbated for those who are already pushed to the margins of our society because of issues like income inequality, because of issues like racism or sexism or homophobia or transphobia or ableism, for example. And so, Peter, I wonder if I can start with you and ask if you can shed some light on how you see these sort of disproportionate impacts playing out in our community here in Waterloo Region, and any efforts that you're maybe a part of or that you've been witnessing to try and address those inequities.
Sure, thanks. And I'll try to be brief because this is a really important question, and my comments are going to be focused on the importance and need for community collaboration. You know, when this first hit, you know, my initial thought was, I'm really worried about the kids that are not going home to a safe space. I'm worried about parents who need a lot of help within the school system and no longer have access to it, and those coping skills are not going to be there. I worry about the seniors that I see every single day that come into the Y, not to just stay physically healthy, but to be emotionally connected. One of my best things that I see at a Y every day is, you know, the coffee clutch, you know, after the the aquafit class, and they get, you know, those folks get often who live alone get more out of that. You know, now that we're back open, you know, I have people regularly saying to me, Peter, please don't close again because I can't go back to my apartment for 6 months. I'm worried about that, but you know, I'm worried about young people. We have a lot of youth programs, you know, young people who, you know, in our case, you know, the Y was their safe space, and then all of a sudden it's gone. So we had to go to a virtual model, and we've done really well doing that. But I think about the collaboration, and then you talk about marginalized groups. For me, on a personal level, one of the biggest things for me is when we, you know, when we closed our building back in March, and I called my friend John Neufeld, who I know everybody knows, and I said, John, we've got this building. Is there anything can anybody use it? And long story short, within 8 days, we collaborated the House of Friendship, the Working Center, the YWCA, the YMCA, and the region of Waterloo. Within 8 days, we opened up a homeless shelter. And credit to Elizabeth and her team at the YW, they literally closed the St. Mark's overflow shelter on like a Thursday morning, and by Friday night they were up and running at the A.R. Kaufman Y. That would have taken us 5 years to plan and organize. We would have argued over everything, and here we just did it. And the thing that struck me, and for me it was the first time I've had honestly the gift to walk with those who are struggling with addictions and experiencing homelessness. I was there every night for the first month, and you know, I was told by some folks, these guys are going to destroy your place. You know, this is going to be so, you're going to regret it. Your neighbors are going to be upset with you. Your members are going to be upset with you. I didn't get any of that. And nobody destroyed anything. I mean, I think there was a mirror that got broken. But what struck me is I made a point of, you know, introducing and telling people, hey, you know, welcome to the Y. And they walked in, and I remember the very first night, and this was all men in this particular case. And this guy just looks around, he says, like, you're going to let us stay here? I said, of course, like, there's nothing else. Like, what else are we going to do with it? He's just like, this is amazing. And, you know, you just see the humanity. And so for me, it's how do we collectively recognize the dignity of humanity, all people, and then work collaboratively to find solutions. You know, that's a perfect example of 5 organizations coming together in a short period of time and just making it work. I hope that after this is over, whenever that is, that we continue to collaborate. There's not a single issue that any nonprofit organization is going to solve on its own. We have to find ways to park institutional ego at the door, and we have to find ways to work together and cross divides that maybe we haven't done before, haven't done well. And that's what I actually hope, that we can find a way to do that, so that we can see the dignity in all people and collaborate to get stuff done.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for sharing that. Donna, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm going to provide a little bit of a different spin. I had a court worker who goes into court and looks after our community members involved with a criminal court, all aspects of criminal court and also family court. And unfortunately, during this time, whether it's due to, well, it probably is due to the isolation and people not having the ability to go to work, but I had the opportunity to get some extra funds from United Way to bring on another court worker, because our numbers have almost doubled in family court and in criminal court. And so it was providing my first court worker, she was being drawn right thin. So now, even though I have another court worker, the cases are very involved, they're very intense. And then it's very hard for me to take the next step for them if anybody needs that help going to a healing lodge or coming in for anger management or having a one-on-one because of where we are with COVID. We're going to have a big hate on for that word. I mean, it's going to be the most hateful word to ever talk about again is that word moving forward, because it has disrupted our lives. It has created inconveniences. It has torn communities and families apart. And it is more, it just adds to the deadliness of what the virus itself is all about. I think in trying to do the best that we can for our community and providing the support that they need, it becomes very hard for an organization to see that the increase in the number of our community members involved with criminal court or family court, because then that brings in the child welfare system, and family and children's services are now involved. And so it just increases the workload for the entire staff of the Healing of the 7 Generations, and it creates that hardship on the family members in our community and their children. So thank you.
Thanks, Donna. And Jim, what is sort of your take on in terms of the inequities that cause certain groups in our community to experience higher levels of isolation, and then efforts to try and address that?
Thanks very much for asking. I have to say that I've got a prepared script I'm reading from, and I'm going to have to deviate from it now because my brain started working more. One of the things I forgot about is because of the strain on the health system, many people in the trans community are having to put off things like hormone replacement therapy or surgeries. And for them, this has become a real challenge. I forgot about that, and it's become very, very painful. I wanted to talk about something a little different, and I'm going to have to read my script here, but I hope it doesn't look like I'm moving my lips or anything here. This is a little bit complicated. In the rainbow community, some people are able to present as though they do not belong to the rainbow community. That is, they don't appear to be trans, gay, bisexual, lesbian, or any of the other fabulous varieties on the rainbow spectrum. We call this passing. And with some effort, I myself am able to pass most of the time, but I long ago gave up any interest in doing that. As you can see by the way I'm dressed right now, I was a professional librarian for my entire career, and being gay was no big deal. But some people consider passing to be critical to their survival. It reduces the likelihood of facing discrimination and outright violence. This indeed does represent a kind of privilege, but that privilege can carry a terrible price with it, because it means if they pass, sometimes they stay so far in the closet that they feel profoundly isolated from the rest of the rainbow community. And this has been the case since I can remember, and my memory goes back to the 1940s, actually. Here's the thing. The pandemic has added another layer of isolation to what those folks already experienced. And right now, the best that Spectrum can do is to continue offering our Zoom meetings. So isolation that already existed because of fear, like outright fear of being identified as being part of our community, we got another layer added on top of it. And I'm imagining that some of the other people on the panel can understand what I'm saying here. Sorry, I'm getting a bit worked up now, sorry.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jim. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into your prepared notes. So thank you for putting so much thought and reflection into this conversation today. So for the next question, Donna, I'm going to start with you, and it sort of puts a bit of a lighter take on things. And it's that over the last several months, there have been some bright moments. And those bright moments are when we've seen that as a community we can, and that we have it in us to live differently and to support each other differently as a community. At United Way, we've certainly seen examples of that, of donors or volunteers stepping up to do more and to give more. And I'm wondering, what inspiring opportunities or solutions have you seen or heard about to address isolation? And what do you feel that we can all do to support one another as we move into the winter and the holidays, and unfortunately also flu season? You're muted, but I know that you're on it.
Hello. I think like right now, you know, just the opportunity, we never thought about Zoom before, you know, before March. We never thought about it, you know, to the extent that how Zoom is in our lives now, and in the roles that we play. We're on it every day. We're on it in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, like whatever we need to communicate out there to the various members of the community. And I think we've also had an opportunity to be able to use the Zoom within our own family. And it's not the same as their person, because at some points in time during the week, we can have Zoom fatigue, but it's still, you know, we can have an opportunity to touch bases with the people that we love and that we care about, and they don't feel so isolated. I've reached out to some of our community members as well who are totally on their own, and had a Zoom set up for them, and it's nice to see them smile because they see you and then they can hear your voice. And it's not the same as being in person, but it's better than just sitting at home, looking out the window, watching your TV. I think too, during this time, even though our community lunches are not available for the community, but we have noticed that there is more community food hampers going out to our communities. And the number of volunteers coming in to help cook for anybody who don't have the ability to cook because of maybe their health, to come in and actually cook meals for individuals and get it sent out. The food hampers go out every day, every week. So it does kind of sort of give community members an opportunity to see one of their own community members, even if it's through the crack in the door. They don't feel so out there on their own. But it gives people too much time to think. So we try to provide our community with kits to help provide them through the workshops that we do. Try and have some really awesome workshops on the weekends and during the week. So it keeps them occupied, and some of those things that they are learning through the workshops, they can continue afterwards on their own time. And if they need any more materials, they know that they're more than welcome to contact us, and we'll put some materials together for them so that they can do these things on their own. So it gave us an opportunity to have to think outside the box and be able to thrive in the community regardless of what kind of restrictions that we do have. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a real story of like creativity and resilience coming together. Jim, what about at your end? What kinds of inspiring examples or solutions are you seeing to combat the isolation?
Well, thanks to something that Donna just said, I'm going to deviate from the script that's on my teleprompter here. And I am going to tell you a story. Several weeks ago, I'm trying to learn how to play the hammered dulcimer here. So I made a little video in which most of it was talking, where I was trying to explain why it was so complicated to figure out where the notes were. And then I played a bit. So my sister Cheryl, who lives in Ottawa, was playing it on her phone, and her cat Nigel was nearby, and he became really interested because he recognizes my voice. My speaking voice is a little unusual. So he was looking at it. So I was basically saying hello to Nigel as well as my sister Cheryl. Anyway, back to my script here. Let me begin by saying that I wish that a few years ago I had purchased a considerable amount of stock in the company that owns Zoom. Honestly, I have no idea how Spectrum could have managed to continue to offer our programs before Zoom became widely available. To begin, let's say that Spectrum continues our tradition of offering all of our programs 52 weeks a year. We don't shut down in the last part of December nor in August because we're open the whole year, because our community doesn't stop needing us during times that many people think of as a holiday or a vacation time. I want to speak of one absolutely critical opportunity that's approaching, and that is December 25th. It's a time of happiness for many people, but unfortunately, it's a time of deep loneliness for many other people, regardless of their faith practice. Because when you're alone and you know that other people are not, it can be a heart-wrenching experience. Over the past several years, Spectrum has organized a special celebration of chosen family on this day, where we've offered good company, food, and music. And we're hearing from members in our community that they need to feel connected this year on that day, even more than in the past. So we're working to do our best with the Zoom celebration this year. It's not going to be the same thing, but people are desperate. They're saying, I'm dreading Christmas this year. I don't know what I'm going to do. So that's it. Some good things have happened, but this is a massive challenge. Christmas, regardless of your faith tradition, can be very painful if you're by yourself. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. Before I came to United Way, one of the jobs I worked at was at Victim Services, and I remember the holidays being a particularly difficult time if you've experienced some sort of loss or trauma earlier in the year. It's like the holidays just bring all of that back up to the surface, whether it's the loss of a loved one or a family member or the experience of some other form of pain. It can be an incredibly difficult time. So I definitely appreciate why so many people are looking forward to this coming together over Zoom for Christmas. I think that's wonderful. And Peter, you've shared some wonderful stories with us already between the folks who are able to come back and access the facilities again and connect with each other in the ways that they weren't able to for a few months when you had to shut down. And also the coming together of organizations to collaborate in a matter of days to address an issue as critical as homelessness in the midst of a pandemic. So I know you've already shared some, but I'm sure you have more, and I'm wondering if there are other inspiring stories or solutions you'd like to share with us.
Sure. I mean, I'm laughing at Jim's comment about Zoom stock. I tell everybody on our staff on every Zoom call, my most joyous day will be when I cancel my Zoom account. That being said, I mean, there is no substitute for meaningful in-person human connection, and the reality is, in many cases, it's just not safe, particularly on a large scale, and given their current situation. What I've recognized is the power of technology is real, and if we embrace it for what it is and not get caught up for what it isn't, there's some really good work. And in our case, I will highlight our youth team. We have a youth center at the Cambridge Y on Hespeler Road, as some of you might know. Where on any given night there's 80 to 100 youth there, and for a lot of them it's the safest place in town. For a lot of them, they hop on a bus an hour each way to get there, to play basketball, to listen to music, to shoot pool, to all those things. And our model was to build it and they will come. I mean, obviously we did outreach, then all of a sudden they couldn't come anymore. And that didn't mean that they didn't need a safe space. And so we had to pivot very, very quickly to a virtual offering. And, our youth team, all of whom are led by young people themselves, very, very quickly embraced the notion of technology. We now offer an on-call service that we didn't offer before, and we can only do that through technology. And it's out on social media, and the youth that we connect with know, who the youth leaders are on any given day, who they can call and text. And, that's something we're not going to change. We're going to figure out how to augment that. So for me, I think the innovation going forward is, on our early days, it's like, okay, so we're going to do this and then we're going to go back. There's no going back. So the question now is, what's the hybrid look like, and how can we actually utilize technology in a way that's really valuable? And then the other piece is we provide a lot of wellness programs for those with chronic disease at the Y. I like to say the Y is part of the small P, small H public health system. We're upstream. If we do our job well, we keep people out of the hospital. And, we have people who are immunocompromised who, are frankly stuck inside, and we've been connecting with them virtually. And we did some research with those folks. And after about 8 weeks, I think, we checked in, and 90% of them, passed the social isolation question. They were feeling, all things considered, pretty good. And they credited their weekly or biweekly, sometimes twice a week connection, to Jim's comment, you just find a way to bring people together. It's not perfect, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we need to utilize this technology, and we need to meet people where they're at. And so for our organization, where we're very much place-based. We've just sort of waited for people to come, and now we're going to meet them where they're at, and that's virtually. But we're thinking about, how do we learn about that? How do we find new places once we can be together again? How do we go and meet youth where they're at, so we're not having to wait for them to come up to Cambridge? And in that particular case, or wellness participants who are not having a good day, so they can't come in for a class, that doesn't mean they can't have a connection. So for me, it's the hybrid, and that's the elusive piece going forward that I think we all have to focus on, is how do we carry on and take what's good from it.
Thank you, Peter. I love that. In spite of the challenges, it's also created an opportunity to maybe potentially reach people that you couldn't before, or in ways that you couldn't before. So I have one more question that I'd like to ask, but before I do that, I see that we have a question from one of the audience members on this call. And I'm realizing as I see that I didn't make a note of saying at the top end when I did my housekeeping notes, that anybody who has a question is absolutely free and welcome and invited to submit your questions. You can do that by using the chat feature, and our panelists here would be happy to take a look and to respond to that in the time that we have left. So the first question that I have here is, if someone wanted to help people who are feeling isolated, how can we do that? I'm wondering who might like to. Jim, did you want to take that one first?
I don't know what to say other than the Zoom sessions. The Zoom sessions work obviously for people who are comfortable in a group. If they're not comfortable in a group, I think we could probably arrange for one-on-one, either via telephone or via Zoom thing, because one-on-one Zoom works as well. But this is a big challenge. It really is a big challenge. Anyone else?
Yes, Donna, I see that you.
I think for me, if somebody wants to offer some sort of help or service, contact the organizations. We'll provide maybe different ways on how you can support the organization and or community members in the safe way. I'm going to kind of jump a little bit ahead, because what I want to do is I want to recognize some big companies out there. When COVID started, because a lot of our community members were isolated and they probably didn't have any devices to connect to the internet and stuff like that, one of the big companies out there donated 50 Chromebooks to the organization, and we had the ability to gift them out to individuals who didn't have that form of communications. So, you know, I would like to challenge those big companies out there. And we got some amazing companies out there in our own region, you know, that could support the organizations here. And then that support would radiate out into the community members. Make the donations, contact, you know, foundations like the United Way, contact the organizations themselves like the Y, you know, make the donation. It doesn't necessarily have to be money, it could be product, you know, so that would be a way for the supporting manufacturers around us. And not all big conglomerates, but we've had support, amazing support from small little stores in the community and our neighbors, and who have made donations and, you know, provided us with their canned goods from their garden. And, you know, it's that brings the community together, not sit back and say, well, you know, I've done my part by paying taxes at every paycheck or at the end of the year. And, you know, this is an opportunity for the Creator allowing us to have to think how we can help one another, how we can help our families by donating a half an hour of our time, or donating, you know, a bag of groceries or 50 Chromebooks or whatever it is to take, some blankets that to people that we know that are homeless that we can take to them, or even rolls of toilet paper. So think about the community, think about your neighbor, think about the people out there who could really benefit from the wealth that is in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Some wonderful suggestions there. And Jim, I saw you had your hand up.
Donna, as usual, reminded me of something, and that was we did get a donation of some tablets. And for our older adults group, people are feeling a lot of isolation. Two of the people who regularly came when we gathered physically don't have internet, they don't have any kind of technology. Some local company donated several tablets that had data plans attached to them. And so we got one of them to those two folks, and now they're able to dial in. they haven't quite figured out how to get the audio working. So what I do is I phone them on the phone and it goes through the microphone here, but they see the picture, they see us. And that's a kind of connection they didn't have, because for several months, all they could do was hear us through the telephone that I had, which is actually ringing right now. I'm going to turn my sound off, but.
Thank you, Jim. Peter, do you have any ideas for those who may be wondering, like, what can I do to help someone in our community that's feeling isolated right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Donna's comment and suggestion was where I would land as well. You know, if there's an organization that is near and dear to your heart, phone and ask. You know, one of the things that we did early on is we set up a portal where people who are connected to the Y, so we know who they are, wasn't there's some level of safety there, would be able to say, I need some help with this, and somebody else, and it was like generally, you know, I need some help with some groceries, or I need some help with this, most of our members, and then we sort of match them up, and generally it was our staff who offered to go and pick up groceries. And, you know, we had a group of 10 of our staff in the lockdown days when nobody was working in the buildings, who did a Tuesday afternoon at the food bank. You know, there was 10 of them that did that. So I think there are certainly ways. The challenge is we don't always know who's isolated, and isolation is not always physical.
Yeah. Thank you. And so the second question is one that, Donna, you started speaking to, but Jim and Peter, I wanted to give you both an opportunity to respond as well if there's anything that you wanted to add. And that question was, what has been your experience with serving people who don't have access to Zoom or technology? And what are your thoughts on internet as a right given the current environment?
So I'd say it's been a challenge for us, particularly with our settlement program and our newcomer families. You know, there might be some assumptions because we closed the borders that there's no newcomers, or that those who are recently arrived don't need settlement anymore. We're one of the largest providers of settlement services in this community. And that's been a real challenge for us, is that access to technology. And, you know, I think your comment around, you know, where is it a privilege and where is it a right? If the economy and the access to services is dependent on technology, we have to find ways to not create digital barriers to programs and services. I don't actually have the answer for that. I love Jim's comment where they actually got iPads donated with plans on it. I mean, we need, those things are great, but we also need some more structural intervention. You know, Donna's talked about structural challenges and would have more, certainly has more expertise in that area in general and specifically than I do. But you know, if we're counting on the generosity of organizations to solve structural problems, we're in big trouble. It's you know, there was something I saw last week that 1/3 of GoFundMe campaigns in the United States is to pay medical bills, which means they're the, you know, one of the largest health insurers in the country. I mean, that's a travesty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have equivalencies here; they're different, but you know, we have to find a way for society and frankly in government to, you know, to break down those systemic challenges and barriers. And access to technology is one of those things, and we have to solve that one too.
Thank you, Peter. Jim, was there anything you'd like to add before we move on to the next question?
No, I have nothing to add. I think both Donna and Peter have spoken eloquently, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect. Again, once again, for those of you who are on the line with us as a participant, if you have a question, please feel free to add those into the chat. So my next question is, you know, as we look ahead with an eye to moving out of this pandemic, Peter, you mentioned you're feeling optimistic about 2022. And so the point where we feel like we're ahead of this, or that the pandemic is in the rearview mirror, is still many, many months away. But what do you feel has been something that we have learned about how we need to move forward as a community? And what's something that we can't afford to lose as a community, even once this pandemic is behind us?
Sorry, did you want me to start?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to sound like a broken record, so I'd actually lean this back over to Donna and Jim. It's that notion of organizational collaboration that we've seen. You know, for those that remember this influx of Syrian refugees, a whole lot of organizations jumped in and solved that, and then they went back to their silos. We can't afford to do that. We have to work together. We have to learn. In our case, we have to learn about systemic bias and racism that exists within our organization. You know, we're looking in the mirror and recognizing that the Y, we've often said everybody belongs at the Y, and we're recognizing that we don't always make that easy. So that's something that we're actively pursuing, and I hope that we can find ways to learn from each other in a way that is helpful for everybody, and in breaking down some of those barriers, acknowledging those privileges, and holding hands and walking side by side, because no organization or individual is going to solve any of this. And I hope that we come out of this without having lost that sense of community, even though we're isolated in many respects and stuck on these stupid video calls that I'm tired of.
Thank you, Peter. Donna, what do you feel has been the greatest learning of the last several months, and something that we can take forward with us?
On a sad note, I would want to say that regardless of where we are in this pandemic, systemic racism stands out and shines its ugly head for our community, and I'm sure for many other community people, in a very hateful, ugly way. And it continues. And this is not a time for that. With any of the systems that are out there, it's a time for the openness. It's a time for coming together. It's a time to serve in a real authentic way. It's not time to say, you know, if you love your job, you don't work for a living. You know, you come in, and I love coming here, and I love working for the people. I love, you know, even having conversations with the funders. It's like, I don't work for a living. I come and I have a big playground, and it is awesome to be here. It's awesome to be in the community, but having that view of everything's in a bubble, and you know, the sun is shining and the roses smell good. There's always poo-poo on the bottom of your shoe every single day. And it doesn't have to be that way. People need to understand that we are people. We are all human beings. We all have a heart and a brain, and our blood's red, and we have 2 legs and 2 arms, and we're here, and we need to make the very best. What we want to make the best, have that same compassion and that same idealism for the people sitting next to us. You know, when people come in and, you know, they're angry and they're frightened and they have the whole world against them, you know, one of the things that we ask them is like, are you hungry? Do you need something? Like, how can I help you? And it brings them down immediately, because if they're not eating right and they're not sleeping right and they don't have a safe place to go, and that includes individuals who do have a home, and individuals who don't. People who do have a home might not have a safe home. You know, they might not have utilities, so they're not warm in the winter. You know, they don't have any hydro or anything. So we need to, this is our opportunity as those with much, those with lots, to take that and share that with the next person, share that with the person across the street, share that from, you know, I'm in Kitchener right now, share that with somebody in Cambridge. We have this ability to do that if we just stop and take a breath for a minute and think outside of our brain. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And Jim?
I have got 2 answers. One of them is really simple, and it echoes something that Peter said. The other one's quite a bit more complex, and I'm not sure the notes I've got in front of me will do me justice. The first one is simply that when we move forward, we've made a decision. Once we can actually meet in our place again, which might be almost 12 months from now, we're going to do it in a mixed format. All our programs will be on site, but also Zoom. That's the easy part of what I want to say. The other part's quite a bit more complicated. And I have to tell you a little bit about the rainbow community, not just in Waterloo Region, but across the world. if you look back, I don't know, 15 years ago, they're what we called gay clubs, gay coffee houses and stuff like that. We call them gay villages all across the world. Those things have started to wither away. There's scarcely anything like that left. And that was pre-pandemic. There are a lot of speculation as to what happened. We have some ideas about what happened, but the fact is, that's what we're with right now. And so what happened is, for some people who are within the rainbow community, they felt they were comfortable going to so-called straight bars, dancing together, being accepted. And sometimes that worked, and sometimes that didn't work so well for other people. One thing that's been highlighted with the pandemic is all of that is shut down. There are no bars, no straight bars to go to either. There's nothing like that anymore. And it's highlighted the fact that our local rainbow community does not have a social place. What we've got at Spectrum is about 25 feet by 25 feet. It's not enough to have a coffee shop in it. It's not big enough to do something like that, because a lot of what we do, our programming is almost all aimed at people who belong to marginalized sub-communities within the rainbow community. So it's support groups and things like that. But a real social place for anyone else, we haven't got that yet. And that's something that we hope to work towards, because it's frustrating. People say, well, is there a place I can go to socialize other than going on something like Grindr or Tinder? That does not work for a lot of people. A lot of people, if they want to make friends with somebody or meet somebody possibly for a romance, they need to do it in a low pressure environment, not someplace where the sexual tension is so enormous. And we don't have that right now. So that's something at Spectrum we're thinking about, but I put that in the category of a big dream. It's a big dream. Wow, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for this. Wow.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim, for sharing, for shedding a light on some of the unique challenges that you face within the rainbow community. Donna, for the power and the wisdom of your words, and for all of the advice and sort of the call to action that you've made for all of us in terms of how we relate to each other as a community. And Peter, for your call to action of how we come together as people, but also as organizations, to create unique solutions to reach people where they're at in the midst of this pandemic. I want to thank all of you so much for agreeing to be a part of this conversation and agreeing to be on this panel today, for your such honest, vulnerable, authentic sharing with all of us. The strength of United Way rests in the organizations like yours that we are able to support. COVID-19, we keep saying, has created more than one challenge in our community, and the programs and the services that you offer ensure that there is more than one solution. And so what you have shared today has certainly been a testament to that, and it is truly an honor to have all of you here and to continue to be able to work with you in the community. To all of you who are here listening to this conversation, thank you to you too. This is a unique opportunity that we have in Waterloo Region to renew, to rebuild, and to reimagine a more resilient community. And we can't do that with all of you. And we know that you're all being stretched and pulled in so many different directions. And so the fact that you've taken the time to be here with us today, be a part of this conversation, to submit your thoughtful comments, your questions, means so much to us. So thank you for that as well.
My last thank you as well, Sonia, because we have to let our folks go. We've run out of time, and we often tend to run over time in these things. And to respect your time, I wanted to just say again, thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your participation. And thank you too to Sonia, who has done a marvelous job making.
Thank you.
And on that note, I suggest we get on to the next parts of our days. Thanks again, Sonia, and thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.